Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Good morning. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to attend this webinar. My name is Ted Adams. I'm an implementation specialist with RedTeam Go. And we're going to be taking a look at the job cost statement in RedTeam Go this morning. First, we need to understand what the job cost statement is. So it's a higher level report that's designed to keep an eye on the over and under view of the cost to revenue on a project. It's intended to be for accounting teams as opposed to other reports that are more tailored for project managers. All right, first of all, where can we find it? So if you go to your dashboard, over on the left side, if you go to commitments, click on that, we'll open up the menu, then you can click on the job cost statement. So that's where we can find it. Now we need to understand the structure. So when you initially look at the job cost statement, there's a lot of numbers on that page and it can be a little overwhelming. So we're going to break it down into bite-sized pieces and look at the individual components, make it a little bit easier to understand. So this is what you see when you log into your job cost statement. I'm going to break this down into a few sections and then we'll dive into each of the sections. So the first thing you want to look at is the date range up at the top in the blue box. Excuse me. This is an area that is that you might want to check first if you're having problems or issues with your job cost statement, and maybe a certain dollar amount isn't showing up. The amount that you're looking for may be outside of this date range, so make sure that you're paying attention to the date range at the top. The next section, when we break this down, is the revenue section across the top, and we'll break this down even further in just a minute. And then at the bottom is the expenses section, and again we'll go through column by column. So going back to the revenue section, the first box that we're going to look at, and we're going to move left to right, and you'll see a lot of functionality that migrates the numbers from the left to the right. So the first section we're going to look at is the contract values. The first line in the contract values is just the original contract value. So the owner contract that was signed by the GC and the owner prior to any change orders, the base contract value. After that, we'll add in any additional approved change orders. And when we add those to the original contract and the approved change orders, that's where we get our revised total. And you should be familiar with that from your owner billing, the front page of your owner bill that most of you generate. The next section over is the balance. So I mentioned that we're going to move left to right and numbers kind of migrate from left to right, so that the revised total, which is the total from the previous section, will be the first line of the balance section. So again, that's the original owner contract plus any approved change orders. So there's the first figure for the balance section. The next section is the billed to date. So this is the total of any bills that have been submitted to the owner. This figure does not include retainage. Retainage is broken out as a separate line item down below this. And you'll also notice, for those of you that are not accountants, any numbers that are in parentheses indicate a negative number. So the billed to date figure is going to be presented as a negative number, as is the retainage. So you'll see both of those numbers are in parentheses. And when we take the sum of all three of those numbers, the revised total, the billed to date, and the retainage, that's where we get the balance. Any questions so far?
We seem to be good on the chat.
Okay, thank you. The next section, again, moving left to right, is the profit projection. So when we dig into this, we see the total contract value, which is the same as the first section where we had the original contract amount and any approved change orders. And then the projected total cost. This is where we're going to start looking at the bottom section of the job cost statement in expenses. There's a column in the expenses section for projected total cost, and we'll look at that in just a minute. Again, a cost is a negative number, so you'll see that in parentheses. And then the difference between those two will give us the budgeted profit. Now we'll also look at earned profit, and just to make that distinction, the difference between budgeted and earned is budgeted is what we're projecting to spend, and earned is money that's already been spent. That's what gives us the budgeted profit. The next section is the earned profit. Like I said, we just made the distinction between budgeted and earned profit. We're going to take a look at the earned profit now. So the profit earned is the total percentage of costs that have been billed times the budgeted profit. And then the total cost to date, again, this comes from the expenses section down below. It's one of the columns in that section. And once again, we'll take a look at that in just a minute here. So when we add those together, that's where we get the earned to date. Now, moving money out of any cost codes that are not going to be spent using an internal change order is going to increase your earned profit by reducing your overall costs. And then the last section in the revenue section is the billing over under. Take a look at that. The first line, the owner billings, is the amount of money due to the general contractor. Any retainage that's being held by the owner. And earned to date, which is the earned profit plus the cost to date. Again, that's a negative number in parentheses. When you sum those three, that's where you get the over under. If it's a positive number, so in this case, you see there's no parentheses on that over under number. That means that it's a positive number. It means that you've billed more than you've paid out. Whereas if it's a negative, oh, I apologize. If that was a negative number, it would show that your costs have exceeded what you billed so far. Any questions on the revenue section?
We seem to be good in the
All right,
chat and Q&A.
Perfect, thank you. Next, we'll look at the expenses section, which is the bottom half of the job cost statement. And again, we have columns going left to right. The first two columns we're not going to spend any time on. It's just the cost codes that are in the project, the cost code and the description. The first column we're going to look at is the budgeted amount. So it's the original amount that's been allocated to each of the cost codes, but it does not include any markups. The next column, going from left to right, from budgeted amount to the approved changes, again, are approved change orders. And that can be an owner change order, a sub, or an internal change order. Any amount allocated to each of the cost codes. Next column to the right is the projected total costs. So it's the sum of the budgeted amount and the approved changes. So the first two columns that we talked about are going to be summed into this column. The next column is the total cost committed. So this is going to be your overall commitment. So any lot subcontracts, change orders, POs, anything along those lines, again, aligned with each respective cost code. Next column is the balance to commit. So it shows what's remaining to spend for each cost code. Keep in mind that it's not going to apply to locked sub cost codes, so the .s cost codes, since no additional funds can remain in the awarded .s cost codes. The next column to the right is the prior period cost. So anything that we billed for already, any amounts, again, aligning with each of the cost codes, any amounts that have previously been billed. Again, moving to the right, now we're going to look at the current period costs. So anything that you're billing for in this current period. This example doesn't have anything billed to the initial 5 cost codes. But as we scroll down, we should see additional figures based on what's being billed for in this period. Retainage. Now, this is only going to be for the subcontractor cost codes that have approved bills from the subs. In the next column, the total cost to date, we'll see that those figures are hyperlinks, and we can click into those for more detail. I'll show you those in just a minute. Again, the total cost to date, it's going to include each of these. So sub billing, POs, expenses, all of these things will figure into the total cost to date. Excuse me. And when we click on one of those figures, on one of those hyperlinks, I apologize. The next column is the balance to finish costs. So this is going to show the remainder of what's projected to be spent or billed. When we get to the end of our project, if there's any remaining costs listed in any of the cost codes, you can use a negative internal change order, and that will move it from that cost code into profit for you. And then the balance to finish cost codes, if there's any subcontractor cost codes that weren't awarded at all, and you can find those in the left side menu under commitments. You can reduce those values to 0 and then click save. And again, it will move that money to profit for you. And then the last column is the percent of cost bill. So as you progress through the project, you'll see how much, again, of each cost code has been billed. If it's less than 100%, means you still have funds to spend. If it's over 100%, it means you've spent more than you've budgeted for. And I apologize, this slide was in the wrong place, but if we go back and show you. If we go back to this column, the total cost to date, if you click on one of those figures in the blue hyperlinks, this is the window that will pop up for you. So in this case, there's 3 POs. You'll see over on the left side with the detail of each purchase order. And that's all I've got for the job cost statement. Let us know if you have any questions using the job cost statement. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.